I think you have both a societal and a fiscal consideration to ensuring that your employees are tracking towards a financially secure retirement. One, I think from a societal perspective, it's just the right thing to do. If you own a company, you're employing people, you're sponsoring a plan, I think you should invest the time to make sure that the plan is run as well as it can be run, that the communication and the education is there for your employees so they can make good decisions. I think that's just kind of personally, I feel like that's an obligation, if you will. If you're going to sponsor a plan. If you're not going to sponsor a plan, that's your business. But if you own a business and you're going to sponsor a plan, make it a well-run plan. But I think also fiscally, if you think about it, and this kind of gets into what you do, think about an aging demographic in your workforce. What's the impact potentially with your health insurance premiums over time? Mm-hmm. What's the implications potentially with increased work comp exposures? Does in fact productivity start to fall off a little bit? Regardless of age, there is a lot of data out there that says that employees who are not financially secure, who are worried about their personal finances, that the productivity drop off regardless of age. It's significant.
Hello and welcome to the Red Bearded Risk Guy podcast, the show that helps business owners and leaders with companies of 50 to 250 employees to protect their people, profits, and public relations. We help business owners maximize profits by minimizing their total cost of risk. Your host, Joshua Keene, also known as the Red Bearded Risk Guy, is a commercial insurance and benefits and risk management expert in the Pacific Northwest, but he has dedicated his career to helping businesses stay ahead of emerging business trends on all business-related challenges, not just risk and insurance. So we will get into interviews with industry experts on everything from strategy and growth to sales and marketing, corporate risk management, commercial insurance, and even motivation. These weekly conversations will provide actionable advice on the latest trends, challenges, and opportunities facing the business community. If you want to stay ahead of the curve and strategically position your business for success, then this podcast is for you. Tune in to the Red Bearded Risk Guy and join the conversation today. And also, while you're at it, be sure to like, subscribe, follow, and leave a review. Thanks for being here. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Red Bearded Risk Guy podcast. I'm your host, Joshua Keene, joined today by Charles Warren. He is a principal and plan consultant over at Multnomah Group, and they focus on helping businesses with their 401k plans and financial planning. And we are excited to have him today, as it's a topic where a lot of businesses or business owners don't know what they don't know about it. And obviously there's a lot of risk that goes along with it too. So we'll get right into the conversation and tell us a little bit about first of all, hi, Charles. Thanks for being here. And
Joshua, thanks for having me.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit, as much personal background as you want to give us about yourself, your family, and then roll right into how you got into doing what you're doing.
Sure. I'd be happy to, Joshua. So my wife and I just celebrated our 37th wedding anniversary this past January. We have 4 adult kids. We're married and they've given us 8 grandkids. So feel very blessed with that. We live out in the East County area. Kind of a Oregon native. I was away for a while. I served 10 years in the Marine Corps, so I was gone. That's actually where I met my wife, down in Southern California, where I was stationed. And then moved back after my time in the service was up, moved back to Oregon and kind of, transitioned to a couple different jobs. Coming out of the military, especially after 10 years, was a little challenging. A lot of things had changed economically, and didn't really have a network here anymore because, of course, as you can imagine, being gone for 10 years, everybody kind of goes to school, starts their careers, moves away, those types of things. So kind of was a fresh, clean slate, and actually started shortly after getting out of the military, actually in your industry, in the insurance industry, which I did for several years. And I think it was a good foundational experience of just working with clients and being consultative. But maybe industry-wise wasn't the best fit for me, but it did lead me into the investment business. And that's kind of where I got started back in late 90s, 2000. working for first one of the big Wall Street firms, got recruited there and worked there for about 5 years. Then subsequently left and started my own firm with a couple of partners that I worked in, building that firm for about 9 years after that. And then in 2014, I started working exclusively with retirement plans. I had always worked from the very beginning of my career. I'd always worked with retirement plans, but made a decision based on what was kind of happening in the retirement plan space. Specialization was becoming more and more important. And so decided to team up with a guy who was one of my competitors previously in the market. And we had become good friends and kind of had some ties, loose ties we went to the same high school. I went to high school with his aunt, actually. So he's a little bit younger than I was. But we teamed up to form a firm that we ran for just about almost 8 years before joining 𝗨𝗡 Group this past October. So that's how I got into doing what I do, and I absolutely love it.
Awesome. Well, it's definitely been great working with you the few years we've been working together, at least in terms of just masterminding ideas with each other and bouncing ideas off of each other. So as far as, a retirement plan for a business, from the business owner standpoint, what are some of the most common challenges or pitfalls that you've ran into with your clients?
Yeah, I think it's important contextually to understand that the retirement plan space, we're talking primarily about 401ks here today, right? But our firm has great demonstrated expertise in really all retirement plans. So 403Bs, 457 plans, so on and so forth. But the team that I'm fortunate enough to work with, we work exclusively with 401k plans, and we work in the smaller end of the market. So, what does that mean, right? But the 401k industry kind of bifurcates the marketplace based on plan size, and that's both plan assets and typically also kind of employee count, or what we call participant count. And in our market, any plan that's under roughly $25 or so million in plan assets is considered a small plan. So that's kind of the space that our team works in. It's what we call the essentials market internally at 𝗨𝗡 Group. And I think it's definitely an important market segment in the Pacific Northwest. If you just think about, company demographics, predominantly are, small privately held companies, right? So they're not necessarily the big publicly traded. Obviously, there's a few of those as well, but the majority of companies are kind of in that small to medium-sized company space. And so when I think about the challenges and pitfalls kind of in our defined market, the essentials market, I think part of it is not maybe understanding their specific fiduciary duties. That's typically a pretty big one. They're like, yeah, I know I have responsibilities. I know I have duties that, some regulations say I'm supposed to fulfill, but I maybe not a real clear understanding of what those specific duties are. They have, oftentimes there's a kind of a lack of a documented process showing that they're fulfilling those duties. That's a huge thing. You'll hear me probably come back to more than a few times here in our time together. And then there's not really another typical challenge or typical thing that we see, at least in the beginning of an engagement. There's not necessarily a process or a mechanism in place to measure outcomes. So it's like, hey, we do all these things, we fulfill all these duties, we're running the plan, but how are we measuring outcomes? What are the outcomes that we're generating? So I would say those are probably three of the bigger ones that I see. Very general, admittedly, but those are kind of some of the things that are pretty common.
Definitely. Well, on the the fiduciary liability piece, and from my perspective, or in the insurance world, not all of us, but the vast majority of us get the gist of what fiduciary liability is. We know how to get you the coverage. We know essentially what it's covering. But from my perspective, in trying to be different and really help my clients, and really the whole 𝗨𝗡 philosophy is to help with risk management and be a strategic partner that can help why do you even have this coverage, and then help you get in front of it to plan and prepare and have processes. And so admittedly, it is a weak point for me. So can you get a little bit into what like a process might look like, or just some of the stuff they really need to be thinking about when it comes to their fiduciary liability.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not rocket science from the perspective that, we always tell clients it's all about documentation, right? You could be doing everything correctly, but if you're not documenting such, then if there ever is a Department of Labor audit or some type of, litigation specific to your plan, it's going to be really hard to prove, that, hey, this is how we've been fulfilling our duties. These are specific actions we've taken and why, those types of things. So it all really kind of boils down to documentation from a process perspective. The other thing I would say is making that process repeatable, right? So there's certain key functions. You talk about, the responsibilities of an 𝗬𝗓 fiduciary. So 𝗬𝗓 being the Employee Retirement Income Security Act of 74. So that's kind of the code, if you will, that governs retirement plans. If you think about the main fiduciary responsibilities, again, when I share these with you, you're kind of going to go, well, duh, that seems logical.
Mm-hmm.
But acting solely in the interest of the plan participants and the beneficiaries. You have the plan for the exclusive purpose of providing benefits to them. That's why you have a retirement plan. It's not for a tax shelter. It's not. I mean, there's collateral benefits to having a retirement plan, but that per 𝗬𝗓, that's should be the sole focus or interest of plan fiduciaries. Carrying out your duties prudently, and that's where we get into process. Right. And I'm going to come back to that one in just a second. Following the plan document, every retirement plan has a plan document. So unless there's some weird provision in your document that's inconsistent with 𝗬𝗓, then you have to follow the plan document. It's kind of the playbook or the rule book for a plan. Diversifying plan investments. That's a fiduciary duty. Paying only reasonable plan expenses. So most plans in our market, at least, they'll pay their, what we call their record keeping costs. So that's the cost to the vendors. You think of all the big, 401k vendors out there. I'm not going to get into names, but there's, plenty of them. So their services have to be paid for. Advisory or consulting costs typically associated with a firm like ours, Multnomah Group. Most times those plan costs are paid from the plan assets. So when that happens, then those costs start getting scrutinized a different way than if the company's paying them directly, because they're being paid out of the plan assets. And if you circle back to, the kind of the first little bullet point I shared, which is act solely in the best interest of the plan participants and their beneficiaries, you don't want to incur, undue or unreasonable drag on the retirement accumulation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, those are, in broad strokes, those are kind of some of the main fiduciary duties. The Department of Labor itself has come out and said, hey, process or prudent process is the most important out of everything because it permeates all the others,
mm-hmm.
right? As you're building investments, as you're looking at plan costs, following the plan document, so on and so forth, you got to have a good repeatable process, to be able to do those things.
Yeah, I really love that you brought up processes. It's such a recurring theme in everything that we do on the risk management side. Well, I guess what you're doing is risk management, but the more broader general sense in terms of risk management, everything comes down to having a procedure or process to prevent things before the insurance kicks in. And really want to give a shout out to 𝗬𝗬𝗁𝗍𝗍. She was the first guest of the podcast. You know her too, and that's all she does is SOPs and processes, and it's so valuable, so huge. It's just I've become kind of a process nerd since meeting her and just getting more and more into risk management. But when you're helping clients, I guess, can you give some examples of some of the most common issues you run into where people maybe are out of compliance or aren't doing everything they should be doing, and maybe what some of the consequences or repercussions could be if they were audited?
Yes, I can. I'm not going to get into specific fees or fines or that type of thing,
Sure,
but I'll just say that, normally for a well-run plan, you could still run into issues specifically around the deposit of, or the timeliness of depositing what they call salary deferral. So, you're an employee at LaPorte, you're participating in the 401k plan there. You have instructed LaPorte to withhold or defer X percentage of your compensation to go into your retirement plan, into your 401k plan. and they don't deposit those deferrals timely, right? Maybe it's one pay period, they do it in, same day or next day, and the next pay period, it's 5, 6, 7 days later. That's a big one with the DOL, especially in the small plan space. It's usually plan operations that clients end up running afoul of, or they're not running their plan consistent with what their plan document says. I would say those are, a couple of the bigger things. If you think about it through the lens of the work that we do, making sure that you have a good documented, prudent process for selecting, monitoring, and when necessary, replacing investments. I mean, that's an ongoing fiduciary duty. And so having a process in place to ensure that happens. So to your question, there's a plan audit. They want to see the plan document. That's probably one of the first things they're going to ask for. What's your rule book say? How did your plan have to run? So we can see if you're doing that consistently. They're typically going to ask for an investment policy statement. That is kind of a delineation or a clarification of what I just mentioned. Here's how. An investment policy statement is not a contract, right? It's just a written guideline, what we call a plan governance document. It says, here's how we select investments. Here's how we monitor investments, the criteria that we're going to look at. When necessary to replace an investment manager, here's kind of the process we go through. Who has different roles and responsibilities as it pertains to the investments, that type of thing. So those are kind of some of the probably main things that we see is, either plan operations running afoul or some aspect of the fiduciary process just isn't well documented. That becomes problematic. Doesn't mean they're never going to find anything. There's probably no perfectly run plan out there, but most of the time, if you're demonstrating that you have a prudent process for all of your responsibilities and it's a documented process, you're going to be in pretty good shape.
Great. Well, that's, again, like you said earlier, it shouldn't be a surprise. It should be kind of a, no-brainer. And it's also not different than how I'll help a client that needs to get their mod under control on their work comp. Like it goes back to, okay, what are your safety programs? What is your safety culture? Okay, you've got it written down, if you do have it written down, but are you actually doing it? Like how often are you actually doing a toolbox talk? When you do a safety talk, are you actually having everybody sign that it's being done so that you can present that to the carrier? So it's really the same concept. It's just crossing your T's and dotting your I's.
It's absolutely the same concept. It's great to say that you have a process. When we speak of documentation, it's really the documentation of the ongoing adherence to that process, right? So, it's kind of the first step of working with a new client is coming in, see what they're doing now, see how we can come alongside and kind of partner to maybe take that to another level, put in place a good repeatable process that through the course of a year, we're going through this, we're making sure that everybody's, fulfilling their fiduciary duties. And then along the way, over that course of the year through, plan review meetings and whatnot, we're documenting the decisions that are being made. We're documenting our adherence to the process. If you do that, you're going to be in pretty good shape.
Awesome. Well, that definitely, I think, is helpful for people that just, it's an intimidating theme. I think a lot of people just go, I don't understand it. And then when someone like you, unfortunately not you, but someone like you comes in and starts talking, they're speaking a foreign language. Kind of like insurance people do too a lot of the time. And so it's definitely helpful to get a grasp of just, what you need to be thinking about as a business owner. And so
you see it in every profession, right, Joshua? I mean, you go talk to your doctor and maybe they're talking in terms you don't understand, or if you're like me, you talk to a tech guy, somebody that's super savvy in tech, and you're like, yeah, I don't understand a thing you just said, right? So it is a challenge. And I think one of the things that we pride ourselves on at Multnomah Group is making sure that we're communicating in a way that a client and or a participant feels empowered to make good decisions because they understand exactly what you're telling them or what you're sharing with them.
Okay. Awesome. Well, did you have anything else you wanted to get into in terms of challenges or process or any of that stuff?
No, I could probably put the audience to sleep with too long of a diatribe on, fiduciary process and all that. I do want to just underscore the importance of it. And, we'll talk a little bit later about, why we do it at the end of the day is making sure that a plan is successful, right? And we'll talk a little bit about how we define that, but definitely. I think that probably wraps it up on the process side.
Definitely. Well, I'm going to put you on the spot. I want to break things up a little bit and kind of move into a rapid fire round. It will, some of it will tie into the conversation, so it's not completely random, but
Okay.
yeah, there we go. So one of my favorite questions for anybody that's in a field I'm not super familiar with, which is, what's one myth in your field that you'd like to see die, or common practice or misconception?
Probably a misconception. I don't know if it's taken on the full form of a myth, but definitely a misconception out there as I hear people talking about investing for retirement. And, we're of the opinion you don't invest for retirement, you save for retirement. And that may seem like semantics or, just kind of a twist on words, but I think the mindset behind it is important from the perspective that far too often we see employees participating in a retirement plan, but they're not really saving at a meaningful rate, right? So they'll have a conversation with somebody like us, an investment advisor or plan consultant, say, well, maybe if I just invest more aggressively, I can get away with not saving enough or putting away enough money out of my paycheck. And that's really kind of the misnomer, is that, hey, we're investing for retirement. Well, from an investment time frame perspective, that's true. This is typically obviously for younger people, especially more long range money, but you're really saving for retirement, because that's going to be the biggest driver of your outcome, is your savings rate, or what we call the deferral rate.
Yeah. So almost thinking of it as more like a cost or something you're buying for the future, rather than an investment that you're being speculative about and trying to grow with hopes.
Absolutely.
Something you don't need, but you hope you get. Whereas the retirement you actually need. And so,
yeah.
And people aren't really operating as if they're going to need it when that time comes. And so,
yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you. So another fun one. You've got tons of books behind you. Are you reading anything good right now?
Yeah, actually we are. In fact, I have it on my desk. I'll see if I can hold it up here. It's a book called The Culture Code. So our firm, every summer, we have a kind of a summer reading program where one of our colleagues who handles kind of the internal training for us, he'll do some due diligence and look at what's out there and find something that a common title he thinks that would be advantageous for our organization, and he'll select the book and then he'll kind of announce it, and we'll all kind of read together. And from time to time throughout the summer, we'll meet, usually virtually, and just kind of have a conversation about what we're learning, how can we apply what we're learning. And it's been a good read. It's talking about just kind of forming, kind of the tagline is the secrets of highly successful groups. So It's just talking about some of that. So it's been good.
Who is that by?
Daniel Coyle.
Awesome. Well,
yeah.
When you get all the way through it, I'll want to pick your brain on that. I feel like I've seen that one mentioned a couple of times. Another fun one in line with the question is,
sure.
Do you have any book? Like, I have a couple that I go back to almost every year in terms of books, or maybe every 5 years, or they just come back up and I'm like, oh, I need a reminder on that. Do you have any like that come to mind for you?
Well, because of my faith, I would say the Bible. I read that every day, so I continuously come back to that. I don't think so much on the nonfiction side. There hasn't been of any books I can think of that I'm like, oh yeah, I need to read this every few years. I've read some great books. Don't misunderstand me, but nothing that maybe has been that compelling. I always like to kind of try to find new stuff or get ideas from friends or colleagues of what they've been reading and if it's been impactful or not. So I can't say that there's been something I've gone back to time and time again.
Awesome. Well, when a lot of people are listening from their car, some people might check it out on YouTube, but when we meet in person, a lot of the time you're wearing leather of some sort because you have arrived to the coffee shop or lunch or wherever we're meeting on your bike. So tell us a little bit about what kind of motorcycle you ride and how did you get into that?
Oh, wow. Okay. I ride a Harley Street Glide. It's a 2015 Street Glide. Got into that when I first went in the Marine Corps. I always wanted a motorcycle. And of course, living at home, mom's like, no way, it's too dangerous. And so, of course, one of the first things I do after I get in the Marine Corps and move, away from home. I'm in Southern California, so I buy a motorcycle, right? And it wasn't a Harley back then because I couldn't afford one, but it was fun. It was back in the no helmet law days of Southern California. So, it's always warm compared to the Northwest. So I had a lot of fun on that. In fact, when I met my wife, I had my bike and was probably, well, not probably, quite foolish riding it, and by God's grace didn't get killed, and that was a good thing. But
Yeah.
then I got rid of that bike. Actually got wrecked, not by me, but by a buddy of mine who I led it to. And so that was probably a blessing in disguise, because then I was bikeless for a lot of years while we were having our family, raising our kids, didn't have the money for one, and then didn't feel right about, being the sole provider for the family and jumping on a motorcycle. But after the kids got grown and whatnot, my wife loves to ride with me, and I don't ride anything like I did back when I was young and dumb.
Yeah.
So try to be careful of that. So that's kind of how we get into it. And it's a hobby for us. We like to go on rides both locally and a lot of beautiful places here in the Northwest, and as well as, ride out of state, going different places we want to see on the bike is cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's probably good. If you're going to learn to ride, but then quit during your 20s. And
right. Wait for your brain to catch up.
Yeah. I wanted a bike during that phase of my life so bad, and part of me is glad that I didn't get one. And I still think about it every now and then, but yeah, it terrifies me now, more so about the other people on the road than me. But
physics is real, right? So you definitely have to pay attention to, everything around you bigger and faster typically. So you just have to definitely pay attention.
Okay. Yeah. Well, this hasn't been much of a rapid round, but I do have one more for you.
Yeah, sure.
Do you have a favorite quote or one that comes to mind when I put you on the spot?
Oh, that one's a kind of actually easy for me. When I first, I mentioned kind of in the intro that after I got out of the service, I went into the insurance business initially. And so you know the industry, you're working with clients, and sometimes the information is not real straightforward, and so you can make it sound however you want to make it sound and that type of thing. And my wife bought me this, I'll show it to you. She bought me this little rock that sits on a little desk rock, right? But it's a quote from Dwight Moody, and it just says, "If I take care of my character, my reputation will take care of itself." And she bought that for me when I first went into business for myself in the insurance business, just as a reminder to, hey, just do the right thing. Don't worry about the sales. Don't worry about what people are saying. If you do the right thing, if you take care of your character, your reputation will take care of itself. I've had this sitting on my desk for the last 25 years, and it's served me well.
And just to make sure I've got the right Moody, is he also referred to as DL Moody?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
He was a pastor or what?
Yeah, theologian of some type.
Yeah. I've heard some really interesting stories about him.
Yeah, regrettably, I don't know much about him. I just the quote really resonated, and it's stuck around through all the different firms I've worked at, and something I keep on my desk to this day because it's just a good reminder.
Yeah, I think the story I heard, and this is someone will have to fact check this. I'm probably not going to fact check it, but he would take, like, he lived in a city area, but he would take like a farm animal, like a donkey or something on a leash, and walk it through busy areas of town, and it would just force people into a conversation with them. And then he would start talking about the gospel with them. And again,
pretty genius.
Don't know if it's true, but it's one of the legends I've heard about him.
Funny.
Awesome. Well, fun stuff. So we'll get back into more retirement stuff here. You alluded earlier, and I want to ask you about, the successful retirement plan. What does that look like, or how would you define a successful retirement plan?
Yeah, great question. I often describe it, again, in an attempt to make something visual or straightforward. You think about two opposite sides of the same coin, right? So when we think about at Multnomah Group, when we think about what makes a retirement plan successful in a general sense, I'd say one side of the coin is making sure that we're maximizing fiduciary support for the plan sponsor or the plan fiduciaries. So all the things we talked about previously, Joshua, the duties, the process, the documentation, as plan consultants, we want to come alongside and make sure that we're really maximizing that partnership, that support for the plan fiduciaries. Because, one thing I failed to mention earlier, a fiduciary, an ERISA, a plan fiduciary, they could be a fiduciary because they're stated in the plan document, maybe by title. Hey, the CFO is going to be the plan fiduciary, or it's not seldom is it by name, but typically, it could be the owner, so on and so forth. But people can become fiduciaries by their actions without even really intending to. So if they're making discretionary decisions on behalf of the plan, by action, they're now that's a fiduciary function. And so making sure that, all the plan fiduciaries, including us, because we stipulate our fiduciary status in writing with our clients, making sure that we're maximizing that support. That's one side of the coin. But the other side is making sure that we're optimizing the retirement readiness for all the plan participants. So that's the employees, the people who are participating in the plan. So maximizing fiduciary support, optimizing the retirement readiness. If we do those two things well, and when we talk about optimizing retirement readiness, it's having those conversations about, hey, we're not investing for retirement, we're saving for retirement. Help me understand why you're only putting away 3% of your compensation in the retirement plan. It's just having meaningful conversations so that people can, they don't understand. It's not their expertise. Most of our clients, they do things that I couldn't do, right? I don't have the expertise to do what they do. So our business is no different. We need to come alongside and make sure both the plan fiduciaries as well as the plan participants kind of understand, hey, you got this great benefit here. Here's the things that you need to do specifically to make it successful.
Definitely. Well, those are good insights. And again, it's one of those scenes where, as you're talking, it all seems pretty obvious. But again, I just feel like this topic, the retirement plan topic, is one of those ones that I think a lot of owners have just throw their hands up in the air and be like, I don't know. I just don't know. And it's not just a fiduciary liability thing. I run into this with all risks where, since they haven't sat down with someone like you and really had a conversation, okay, here's what your process is going to be, and we're going to help you monitor it, and we're going to remind you and do all these things. You just run into a lot of messes with people that haven't had that guidance in terms of just not having a plan. So,
yeah, and I think there's two general flavors of companies out there as it pertains to retirement plans. I think there's some organizations, and this isn't a judgment statement, it's just been my experience over the last, 2.5 decades of doing this. You have some companies that have a retirement plan simply so they can check the box and say, we have a retirement plan. But they're really not committed to devoting the time to, putting together a good process, even with help. They just kind of like, eh. Now, I would say that's the minority of companies out there, at least the ones I've come across. And then you have others that really see their people as their most significant business asset. They're like, hey, our people are the most important thing here. We want to make sure that, they have a good retirement plan. And so they're willing to invest the time. So there's that dynamic as well.
Yeah. Well, and I'm comparing your relationship to the insurance relationship, and the business owner. I feel for the business owner because they haven't taken the time. I'll use insurances as an example. They haven't taken the time to they're not a licensed insurance agent. And so they can have an idea of what makes sense and be really smart and get the big picture. But at the end of the day, they're looking at you. It's like, okay, you told me this is good to go. This is all right. And so there's a lot of trust, and just they don't really know unless they're working with someone that has a track record of being successful with it. And so,
boy, that's right on the money. And you hit a very important word, trust. I mean, that's so huge. I mean, because I know our goal, we're not looking to make our clients ERISA experts or retirement plan experts. In fact, that's part of the reason they hire us, is they don't want to be experts, right? They're like, hey, we have the ability per ERISA to delegate certain responsibilities or certain functions, still retaining responsibility, but they can delegate functions, right? So, we take that very, very seriously, try to be fiercely independent and making sure that, we keep ourselves beyond any conflicts. And much like the plan fiduciaries have to do for the plan, we want to do this with our clients. We're going to advise and consult solely in the best interest of the plan and all the people that are participating in it.
Definitely. And I might be getting into the weeds too much on it here, but when they decide to delegate those duties that they can to a firm like yours, How does that work from your firm's perspective in terms of like the liability transferring? Because as an example, as an advisor on someone's insurance, I'm taking on part of their liability to some extent when they come to me for advice on that. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's ERISA fiduciary duty is one of those things you can never delegate it away fully, right? You can hire professionals, so you could hire a firm like ours as what we call a 321 fiduciary advisor, which is probably the more typical of the engagements we go into. But you could also hire a firm like ours, which we also serve occasionally as is what they call 338 investment managers, which is it's all just either discretionary or non-discretionary is really the primary distinction. But regardless of what path you go down, you're still responsible to monitor your service providers, right? So if you own a company and you're sponsoring a retirement plan and you're one of the plan fiduciaries, Joshua, and you hire Multnomah Group to be your plan advisors or your plan consultants, yes, we're going to provide certain functions. We're going to have a client service agreement. We're going to say, here's all the things that we're responsible for. Here's the things you're responsible for. But if something goes really, really sideways, they're still going to look at you, they being the regulators, and saying, you had a duty to supervise Multnomah Group, right? Yeah. So I think part of the way that gets alleviated a little bit is we're very hands-on as a firm. So, clients are not calling us saying, hey, we haven't met in a while. We're kind of proactively pushing out typically quarterly or semi-annual meetings where we can document the process, document the work that we're doing, helping them fulfill their monitoring of us. Yeah. So that they can see very transparently, here's the work that Multnomah Group is doing on our behalf.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's with anything risk related, it's interesting how much a business can change in 6 months to a year. And
yeah, absolutely.
If you're not having those conversations, those changes can drastically impact the insurance or the plan or, whatever it is that you're working on. And you can, again, run into major headaches if you haven't been proactive about it and sat down with an advisor before making any big change. That's really, if you're making changes to your business model or plan or adding a new service, you should be talking to all of your advisors before you make that change instead of letting them know 6 months after you've made the change. But it goes,
well, for sure,
how it goes, or a lot of the time how it goes. So
yeah, that's I think it's in the DNA of entrepreneurs, right? It's like I'm going to charge ahead, I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and candidly, I'm probably not terribly different. I mean, it is true, but I think some wisdom is maybe consulting with advisors. Look what happened just with the pandemic in the last couple of years. I mean, did that in fact not change a lot of things for businesses and subsequently even how we service plans, go into more of a virtual environment, which for us was kind of a non-event because we'd already served clients out of our geographical area. So virtual meetings and things like that was kind of a non-event for us, but it did affect, working with participants and things like that, especially for displaced workers that were now working remotely, So it's just interesting. A lot of things can change fast.
Definitely. So, a real, hot topic right now, key theme right now, although I feel like it's slowing down a little bit, but it's not going to go away, is labor shortages and hiring good talent. It seems like when I call people about insurance and they don't know who I am and they're too busy to talk to me, and I usually try to ask them, well, what else do you have going on? Hiring is like high on the list. I don't have enough guys to send out to the field, whatever it might be. So how can a plan consultant help businesses leverage their retirement plan, or just how can a business leverage their retirement plan to attract and retain good talent?
Yeah, great question. Because I'm hearing the same from our clients. It seems to be a pretty common refrain from regardless of industries. Man, it's hard to find talent, hard to keep talent. I'm not going to suggest that the retirement plan in and of itself is so important that that's going to be the complete differentiator for any company to recruiting and retaining talent. That would be absurd. I think pay obviously is going to be, probably one of the big drivers, culture being another one. But I think the retirement plan can definitely be woven into those conversations from the perspective of, how's the plan designed? Is the company providing a match? And if they are, what does that look like, right? A lot of times, businesses maybe don't want to hear that because the implications on the impact to cash flow and all that. And we certainly understand that. It's easy for us as consultants to say, hey, make a higher match. It's not our money, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to be able to balance the reality of a company's cash flow with the type of match that they offer, the size of the match, But things even more simple, like eligibility criteria. If you think about, let's say you're a candidate and you're looking at two different companies or competing companies in the marketplace, Joshua, and everything else being equal, the pay is about the same. They're both super well-run companies, they're making that 100 best places to work list every year, maybe even have friends at both companies are like, oh yeah, this is, great place to work. Everything's kind of lining up, and it just comes down to the retirement plan. So at company A, you have to be, employed there for 6 months before you become eligible for the retirement plan. Maybe at company B, you have to be employed for 30 days.
Mm-hmm.
So something as small as that. Now, is that maybe kind of I don't know if it's even ridiculous the right word. It's kind of probably not going to come down to everything else being that equal, right? Mm-hmm. But as it pertains to recruiting and retaining, what I often advise clients is, hey, look, there's only so many things you can do because of non-discrimination testing or cash flow considerations or different things like that to really set your plan apart. But let's try not to make your plan prohibitive to the process of attracting and retaining talent. In other words, let's not create hurdles that don't need to be there. So plan design can definitely, come into, vesting schedules, eligibility criteria, the structure of the match, those types of things. And then I would also say kind of after the fact, so after you've hired somebody, we were of the strong opinion there needs to be effective communication with the employees about the significance of this retirement plan benefit that their employer is offering. It's one of those things sometimes when people are like, oh yeah, they got a retirement plan. Oftentimes the employee doesn't understand that, hey, look, this is how your plan is different. And we work with a lot of different industries, a lot of different companies, right? So there's been times when we've worked with companies that for their own various reasons, there's no match. So the plan exists for employees to defer into, but there's no company money. No company match, no profit sharing, anything like that. Well, having those conversations with employees of a company where they do match or they do have historically made, a discretionary profit sharing contribution, say, hey, this is not normal, or this is not, a given, and your employer is really, they got some skin in the game to try to help you be successful saving for retirement. So, having that kind of communication strategy, I think, is important too, so that people are aware.
Definitely. Well, and you touched on it, but bigger theme, I think, is probably the culture, and I think this weaves into that. But you need this is a piece that I don't even really know how to navigate because it's really challenging. There's a lot of moving parts, but as the business owner who's rolling out these benefits for the employees, most business owners I deal with aren't just checking a box. They really do want to provide a benefit to their employees. And Agreed. So balancing budget and your employees' needs and everything else, and then having policies and plans in place that actually reflect the values of the business is really hard. It's really challenging, but it's just something that in order to, build to where you want to go, it's something to be thinking about and being proactive with. But the culture theme, it's, the 401k can be perfect. And if your manager sucks and makes you want to call in sick every day, then it's not really any good. So shout out to people like Crystal Intadano or, my friend 𝗏𝗂𝗏𝗏𝗏. There's some HR rock stars that help with those sorts of things.
Oh, you're 100% correct, Joshua. Because it's like you can't, and those aren't typically companies like that. Those aren't companies that are fun to work with. It's I don't want this to come across the wrong way, because obviously everybody loves to gain a new client engagement, but I think the client advisor or consultant engagement is kind of a mutual selection process, right? It's like, hey, does our skill sets and our pricing and all things that we do, does that line up with what you're looking for? And are you the kind of organization we want to work with? And so, the culture is huge. It's a big part of it.
Definitely. Well, that's good stuff. So I think we've all learned a lot, today listening to you, and I appreciate you sharing your expertise today. We meet all the time, but I think I learned a little bit more about you personally too. So that's always fun. But do you have, before we wrap up here, any kind of final thoughts or key takeaways that you would want the audience to take home with them?
I think there's probably two things when we're speaking with prospective clients that kind of are a recurring theme. One is just that the retirement plan environment, it's just grown increasingly complex, and we don't see that slowing down anytime soon. As you're probably aware, with the legislation that was passed in the fourth quarter last year, the Secure 2.0 Act or Secure Act 2.0, there was a ton of retirement plan provisions just in that piece of legislation alone. So it's getting more and more complex, which typically when the government starts to get more and more involved, that's what you see is increased complexity, right? And I think part of the impetus behind that is I think everybody's aware that as a culture in the U.S., we have not done a good job of saving for retirement. That's a generalization, but I think that's certainly in the work that we do, we see that. So I think hiring a firm that has demonstrated expertise and focus in retirement plans is pretty important. Any licensed financial advisor technically can serve a retirement plan, but do they have the demonstrated experience and the focus? I think that's should be a pretty big consideration, just because of the increased complexity. And then the other thing I would say, kind of opposite that, is talking to businesses, and from what you do, Joshua, I think this will resonate with you. I typically tell clients or prospective clients, say, look, and this is just my opinion, but I think you have both a societal and a fiscal consideration to ensuring that your employees are tracking towards a financially secure retirement. One, I think from a societal perspective, it's just the right thing to do. If you own a company, you're employing people, you're sponsoring a plan, I think you should invest the time to make sure that the plan is run as well as it can be run, that the communication and the education is there for your employees so they can make good decisions. I think that's just kind of personally, I feel like that's an obligation, if you will. If you're going to sponsor a plan. If you're not going to sponsor a plan, that's your business. But if you own a business and you're going to sponsor a plan, make it a well-run plan. But I think also fiscally, if you think about it, and this kind of gets into what you do, think about an aging demographic in your workforce. What's the impact potentially with your health insurance premiums over time? What's the implications potentially with increased work comp exposures? Does in fact productivity start to fall off a little bit? I'm not saying it does. I'm one of those guys that's an older guy. I think I work as hard as anybody, but there's a potential. For that to happen. I will say, kind of to that last point, regardless of age, there is a lot of data out there that says that employees who are not financially secure, who are worried about their personal finances, that the productivity drop off regardless of age, it's significant.
Yeah.
So I think trying to solve some of those things, hire the right firm, make sure they have a good demonstrated expertise and focus, and then make sure that the retirement plan is being run as well as it can be so that the employees can retire on time with some dignity. I think those are two good goals. If you do that, I think you're going to be on the right track.
Yeah, no, it really is, and maybe I have a bias. I sell insurance, so I believe in it. But, from a societal standpoint, for the financial side, we're all going to pay for that, for the underfunded retirements and people that are going to be left holding the bag. We're all going to be left holding the bag on that. And so it's just, and that it's no different than what I do. Whereas if I give bad advice to someone and they have a huge uninsured loss, yeah, the company takes a loss, but a lot of people involved take a loss, and really all of society suffers for it.
Look what's happening with Social Security right now because of mismanagement by the government, and then this, unexpected longevity increase from a life expectancy perspective is causing a conundrum, right? That everybody's aware of, and that's obviously on a more broad scale. But I could say you could take that same lesson, if you will, and see how it pertains to your retirement plan. I mean, maybe make some different choices.
Definitely. Well, again, Charles, thanks for joining us. I think we've all learned a lot. If anybody wants to connect with you, if I'm a business owner that just wants to have this reviewed, or maybe just doesn't feel like they have a good advisor in this area, or just has questions, how do they get in touch with you?
Probably email is the easiest way initially. And I have a lot of those conversations over the course of a week. They don't obviously all turn into an engagement. Sometimes it's just like, hey, I got a couple questions, or maybe I'd like to have my plan reviewed, that type of thing. But email charles.warren@multnomahgroup.com.
Okay.
Best way to reach me. Happy to chat with anybody and, see if I can be of help.
Awesome. And then you'll obviously be tagged on the LinkedIn post that goes out, and we'll include your email and website and all that stuff in the show notes on every platform where this gets posted. So thanks for listening, everybody. I hope you all got a lot out of this, and be sure to join us on the next episode of the Red Bearded Risk Guy. Have a good day.